Today, we are going to talk about the Biden housing policy. I've thought of different subtitles for this talk. I've thought about subtitling it Disaster in the Making, or Much Ado About Nothing, or something, but mostly just ado, or A Lot of Talk, hopefully little action. I've been at this for a few years, and I've done more than 500 radio shows and managed to stay almost completely out of politics. I don't intend to change that today, but we're going to get close to that line as I take aim at stupid policy decisions. Sometimes I imagine the Biden advisory team sitting in a room with a whiteboard brainstorming ideas and initiatives for the country. They throw a bunch of ideas on the board, and then someone says, "Okay, let's vote on which of these best says to the American people, we care." They narrow it down to 15 or so policy decisions that will profoundly affect the nation, the economy, and the well-being of 330 million Americans. Someone in the back, probably the only person in the room who has ever had an actual management position in the private sector, says, "Shouldn't we consider the economic impact of these decisions?" Everyone in the room just stares like, "Come on, man, we care. Isn't that enough?" The people, they'll adjust. We'll get votes because it looks like we really care. So they have about 15 bad ideas up there, and they have to narrow it down to about 7 or 8 so they can begin to write the laws, the rules, and the regulations, and the executive orders for the things they know Congress will never pass. I can almost picture someone saying, "How are we going to narrow these down?" Someone else says, "Well, which are the dumbest and most counter to any common sense? Which ones will hurt the American people or our international reputation the most? Those ideas become the winners." Seriously, as I've watched the Biden presidency over and over again, it seems like the decision made is the exact wrong decision, almost deliberately designed to create maximum damage to our country's reputation in the world or the daily lives of the American people. Examples. To the Taliban in Afghanistan, you can have it. Oh, and here's our gift of $80 billion worth of American equipment and weapons. To the Afghan people, screw you. And to the Afghans who are helping the U.S., good luck in your afterlife. To the Afghan women and girls, sorry about your prospects for equal treatment or even a basic education. To American oil companies, we're going to put you out of business. And to prove it, we shut down the Keystone Pipeline, stop all new leases for oil and gas on federal lands, which, by the way, if you didn't know this, 28% of the land area of the United States is owned by the federal government, and more than half of several western states. So it shouldn't be a surprise that we're paying $4.50 a gallon for gas. What does the president do to fix it? He goes to a country that hates us and asks them for more of their oil and gas. And there seems to be no one in this administration to realize how stupid this is and how foolish it looks. It says, our oil bad, their oil good. To the American people, can't afford $5 a gallon gas? Go buy a $50,000 electric car. That was actually said. To the providers of electricity, all fossil fuels are out. Nuclear energy is out. Get ready to rely on the weather because, we can predict and control it. To the American people, have you seen those rolling blackouts in California? It's just a preview of what will be a national pastime in 2023. So now let's talk about housing. Since the government is so good at fixing everything else, let's try something new. And someone in that policy room says, Moody's says we are 1.5 million homes short of what we need. Now, I will tell you that the National Association of Realtors weighed in and said it's more like 5 million. But anyway, they're going with the Moody's report. What can we do to create more housing units? From this came the briefing room statement that I reference in the notes below. I've read it. You might also want to read it, especially if you're suffering from insomnia. One of the best lines in the entire report is in the last sentence of the first paragraph, and I'm going to quote what I think is the almost breathless enthusiasm of this English language challenge staff writer. Here it is, end quote. This is the most comprehensive of, wait a minute, I got to get it right. This is the most comprehensive all-of government effort to close the housing supply shortfall in history. Yeah, I think they missed a little something there, but most comprehensive effort in all of history. Okay, wow. If you believe this report, they're going to throw federal money around and solve the problem in maybe sometime by 2025. Listen to this quote, and it's kind of a long quote from the report. The president continues to urge Congress to pass investments in housing production and preservation. One independent analysis of proposals in the House of Representatives passed reconciliation bill found that the housing-related proposals would finance close to 1 million affordable homes. Key provisions, like the expansion of LIHTC and the Neighborhood Homes Tax Credit, have received bipartisan support. The president's 2023 budget includes investments in housing supply that would lead to the production or rehabilitation of another 500,000 homes. Building on the actions the administration announced last September to build and rehabilitate 100,000 homes over the next 3 years, these legislative proposals and the new administrative steps being launched in partnership with state, local, for-profit, and nonprofit partners can put the economy on a path to closing the housing supply gap in the next 5 years. I read this and I can't help but wonder, why is the federal government building and renovating homes? Is that really what we want our government and our tax dollars to do? Oh, but it sure seems like someone cares. Why should your tax dollars be taken to build a home for someone else? In fact, what does the Constitution of the United States say about housing? Okay, I'm sure you know the answer to that is nothing, but that isn't going to make them stop. So moving on, let's take a look at what the government is actually proposing to do. Number 1, encourage municipalities to modify zoning rules. There are federal grants and DOT money for all that cooperate. So the Department of Transportation is now going to be funding housing projects. Why not get the National Endowment for the Arts involved? Then the houses might be pretty. Or, well, maybe not. Number 2, change some rules for federally backed financing. Here's the one good thing I pulled out of this report. And I got to give credit where credit is due, and I think this thing is actually credit worthy. They're trying to figure out a way to get permanent financing for manufactured homes. Manufactured homes are finally getting some respect. And that could be a good thing. It's an uphill battle, unlikely to actually go anywhere, but I appreciate them saying it. Now, here is the bad. They propose to restart down payment assistance and loan programs designed to help unqualified people own homes. Some of you are too young to remember that President Clinton also addressed the problem of low-income housing. The seeds of the mortgage meltdown were planted during his presidency. Under Clinton's Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the HUD, under him, HUD Secretary Andrew Cuomo used his Community Reinvestment Act regulators to give banks higher ratings for home loans made in credit-deprived areas. Banks were effectively rewarded for throwing out sound underwriting standards and writing loans to those who were at high risk of default. If the banks didn't comply with these rules, regulators reined in their ability to expand lending and deposits. So you see, the government is using financial incentives to get banks to make basically poor decisions on loans and using penalties if they don't go along with this. These new HUD rules lowered down payments from the traditional 20% to 3% by 1995 and 0 down payments by 2000. What's more, in the Clinton push to issue home loans to lower income borrowers, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac made a common practice to virtually end credit documentation. Low credit scores were disregarded, and income and job history was also thrown aside. The phrase subprime became commonplace. Wow. Next, the Clinton administration rules ordered the taxpayer-backed Fannie and Freddie to expand their quotas of risky loans from 30% of portfolio to 50% as part of a big push to expand home ownership. Fannie and Freddie were securitizing these home loans and offering 100% taxpayer guarantees of repayment. So now all of us taxpayers were on the hook for these risky, low down payment loans. Tragically, when prices fell, lower income folks who really could not afford these mortgages under normal credit standards suffered massive foreclosures and personal bankruptcies. So many of these people will never get credit or own a home ever again. It's a perfect example of Washington bureaucrats using the government allegedly to help the poor, but ultimate consequences were disastrous for them. I was flipping houses and watched all of this happen. I sold numerous homes to people making no down payment. In fact, some were getting money back at closing. I sold a $500,000 home on the 3rd Fairway at Heron Bay in Locust Grove, Georgia, to a lady who made $40,000 a year as a pharmacy assistant. How in the world is she qualified? She lied about her income. Her loan had no income verification component. Here's the ugly. If this goes through 5 to 7 years from now, these chickens will come home to roost and a wrecking ball will once again smash our economy. All right, there's more. The third major proposal is change the rules to shut out large investors. At least they've got the courage to say what they really want to do. Well, what is a large investor? In one place, it's anyone who owns 10 properties. In another place, it's 100 properties. In another place, they just call them large institutional investors, some large amount. This document reveals a reflexive bias against successful investors. I'm going to quote here. Large investor purchases of single-family homes drive up home prices for lower-cost starter homes, making it harder for aspiring first-time and first-generation home buyers, among others, to access wealth-building opportunities from home ownership. I sure would like to see them prove that. They state it as a tautology, but they don't provide any data. They just assume it's a given fact that successful private companies are ruining it for everyone else. We see this kind of bias creep in a lot of different things said by this administration. It's an anti-big business thing. Now, there are a number of reasons for the upward price pressure in the housing market over the past 7 years. And yeah, the abundance of buyers, more buyers than there are properties, that's the main reason. Whether it's institutional buyers or regular people on the street, we have more buyers than we have properties. Now, we at the Flipping America Show have been documenting all of these reasons, and we've talked about them over and over again. One of the key reasons for the overheated housing market over the past several years is simply the fact that we haven't been keeping up with new construction. The regulatory cost for developed building lots is so high, it makes almost no financial sense for the builder to build what might be considered a starter or affordable home. For the same underlying lot expense, you can build a starter home and make $25,000 or $30,000, or you can build a larger home with slightly more money and a little bit more time and make $60,000 to $80,000. Now I ask you, my friends, what would you do? In response to this memo, this proposal by President Biden and his team, I would like to suggest an idea. I know this is going to sound novel, but I would suggest give the free market a chance. Builders and developers know how to act in their own self-interest. They know the pool of prospective buyers is much larger for starter homes. So if the government would simply get out of the way, you would see a huge positive response. If builders could make a profit on starter homes, they would build them by the millions. You wouldn't need to bribe local municipalities with DOT money and grants to get them to build them. In order to do this, you'll need to convince local bureaucrats to modify and streamline the money-grabbing, project-delaying permitting process. You're going to have to remove the onerous requirements of a dozen or more state and federal agencies that purport to tell developers what they can do with the land. And you're going to have to get the Environmental Protection Agency to relax a little bit as well. Then you're going to have to get the Department of Transportation and all the other unrelated departments in the federal government out of the housing business. But this is not going to happen. Why? Because it's smart and sensible, which doesn't play well in Washington. It allows private enterprise to make money, which rankles this administration. So it's going to be another federal intrusion into private life, if passed, which is also doubtful. That means the most likely outcome of, I'm going to quote it again, the most comprehensive all-of-government effort to close the housing supply shortfall in history will be no change. And given how they state they want to change things, I think no change is a better option for us all. If you like this almost weekly update on what's going on with real estate here on YouTube, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, ring the bell, share with a friend, and I appreciate it very much. See you soon.